Imagine a giant metal box. This box is not filled with shiny gold or sparkling jewels. It is filled with something better. It is filled with a huge mountain of cash, $6 million, all in paper money that no one can trace. This river of money sits inside a vault at a big airport. This airport is JFK in New York City. The money is in the Lufthansa cargo building. The building is like a fortress. It has thick walls, strong locks, and many guards. Getting inside to take the money seems impossible. It was the biggest cash robbery in the country's history, but every strong fortress has a secret weak spot. For this building, the weak spot was a person. An inside man named Louis Werner worked there. He owed a lot of money from gambling. He was ready to share the building's secrets to fix his problem. Louis did not just have a key. He knew how the whole place moved and breathed. He knew when the guards took their coffee breaks. He knew where the cameras could not see. He knew the perfect time to sneak in without anyone noticing. A plan this big needed a master planner. That planner was a man named Jimmy Burke. People called him the Gent because he was always polite. But behind his smile was a very clever mind. He loved a good challenge, and this was the biggest one yet. Jimmy looked at the giant airport and did not see a fortress. He saw a puzzle box. He knew that if he had the right information, he could figure out how to open it. He was obsessed with every small detail. He planned everything perfectly. To pull off his plan, Jimmy needed a special crew. He did not pick his friends. He picked men who were like tools, each one good for a different job. He needed a team of experts who would follow his orders without asking questions. In his crew was a scary man named Tommy DeSimone. Tommy's mean reputation was a weapon all by itself. There was also Angelo Sepe, who was cool and calm under pressure. Each person was chosen for a very specific and dangerous skill. The heart of Jimmy's plan was simple: use the airport's own schedule against it. Louis Werner, the inside man, gave Jimmy a perfect timetable. It showed what every guard did and when they did it, minute by minute. The crew would move like ghosts, using the airport's own routine as their map. The plan was all about timing. The crew knew that at exactly 3:12 in the morning, the main guard would be walking at the far end of the big building. This was their window. This was the moment the whole plan would start, all thanks to a simple piece of paper with a schedule on it. But every great plan has a weak spot. For this heist, it was the getaway van. The crew chose a plain black Ford Econoline van. It was a common type of van, so no one would notice it. Jimmy Burke had one very important rule. After the heist, the van had to be driven straight to a junkyard. It had to be crushed into a small metal block right away. This was the most important step to erasing their tracks. The plan was built on speed and fear. The crew would not be sneaky. They would be a loud, fast storm. Wearing ski masks, they planned to rush into the building and take control in less than 1 minute. Their main weapon was surprise. By moving so fast and being so aggressive, they would scare the 11 workers. The workers would be too shocked to press any alarm buttons or call for help. Each person in the crew had a special job. Tommy DeSimone's job was to be the scariest. He would wave his pistol and yell, herding all the workers into one big room so they could be watched. Another robber had just one task. He had to find the night shift supervisor. The inside man, Werner, had told them exactly who to look for. This supervisor was the key to everything. Once they had the supervisor, they would force him to take them to the big vault. He was the only person with the codes and keys needed to open the 2 giant steel doors that protected the money. On the night of December 11th, 1978, the plan began. The black van rolled quietly up to the cargo building. But then, the crew saw a huge problem. A police car was parked right near the entrance. The whole heist stopped before it even started. Inside the dark van, the crew froze. They held their breath, their hearts pounding. If the officer in the car saw them, their multi-million-dollar plan was over. Then, after a few long, silent moments, the police car's lights turned on. It slowly drove away. The path was clear. The crew grabbed their tools and exploded out of the van, a wave of dark shapes moving in the night. With a final, soft click, the last lock gave way. The giant metal door to the Lufthansa vault was now unlocked. Inside that dark room was a treasure bigger than any of them had ever dreamed of. This was the moment that would make them all rich, or it would be their last mistake. The heavy door swung open, revealing a breathtaking sight. It was not just a few bags of money, it was a sea of treasure. Tall stacks of cash-filled boxes that were piled to the ceiling. Trays of shiny jewels glittered under their flashlights, sparkling like stars. It was more money than they could have imagined. For a moment, the crew just stared, their eyes wide with wonder. But their training kicked in. They did not cheer or shout. Instead, they formed a perfect human chain, passing boxes and bags from one person to the next with speed and care. The van, now heavy with millions of dollars and precious gems, sped away from the airport. It drove into the dark, quiet streets of the city before the sun came up. The getaway was perfect. Not a single alarm had been triggered. The Lufthansa Heist was a complete success. But the thrill of the perfect crime was already starting to fade. As the sun began to rise, a new feeling took its place: fear. The hardest part was not stealing the money. The hardest part would be keeping it, and keeping the secret safe. This is where everything started to go wrong. This is the real reason the Lufthansa crew turned on each other, or more accurately, why their leader turned on them. Jimmy Burke, the mastermind, became filled with deep worry. The first big mistake was the getaway van. It was found by police just 2 days later, a huge clue left behind. This discovery lit a fire of paranoia in Jimmy's mind. He started seeing danger everywhere. He had told everyone in the crew not to spend any money right away, but some of them did not listen. They started buying fancy cars and expensive fur coats, showing off their new wealth. To Jimmy, these crew members were no longer partners. They were problems. They were loose ends that could unravel his perfect plan and send him to jail forever. He believed that the only way to be truly safe was to make sure no one could ever talk about the heist. And so, he made a terrible choice. He decided to clean up the mess himself. One by one, the members of the successful heist crew started to disappear. Jimmy began removing anyone he thought was a risk. The men who had worked together so perfectly were now being hunted by their own leader. The great Lufthansa heist ended not with a celebration, but with a quiet, fearful purge. The genius plan worked, but the greed and fear that followed destroyed everyone involved. The crew was torn apart not by police, but by the very man who had brought them all together. The first crack in the perfect plan came from a man named Stax Edwards. His job was simple: take the getaway van to a car crusher in New Jersey. The van held clues, and it had to disappear forever. But Stax did not do his job. He left the van parked near his friend's house. Police found the van just 2 days after the heist. It was a huge mistake. Inside, they found a muddy boot print that matched a print from the crime scene. The net was already closing in. The crew was no longer invisible. When Jimmy Burke heard the news, he was not just angry. He was terrified. In his world, a mistake like this was a death sentence. He saw Stax not as a clumsy friend, but as a giant flashing sign pointing right at him and the stolen money. Jimmy lived by one rule: leave no witnesses. He believed that loose ends would unravel everything. The van was the biggest loose end of all. It told him that some of his crew were not smart enough or careful enough to stay quiet. Other members of the crew made a different kind of mistake. They were told to lay low and not spend any of the money right away. But the lure of millions of dollars was too strong. They started buying flashy, expensive things. One crew member's wife bought a very noticeable pink luxury car. She even showed it off to her neighbors. This was like waving a giant flag for the police to see. It screamed, "We have a lot of new money." For Jimmy, this was the final straw. His crew was being loud and foolish. Their greed was putting everyone in danger. He decided he had to clean up the mess himself by getting rid of the people who were making the noise. Stax Edwards was the first to disappear. Jimmy called him for a meeting. Stax went, thinking he could explain his mistake. But after that meeting, no one ever saw Stax Edwards again. He was gone. Word of Stax's disappearance spread through the crew. Panic set in. They understood what was happening. Jimmy was not just their leader anymore. He was a hunter, and they were his prey. The trust between them was completely broken. Soon, others started to vanish. One by one, the men who had pulled off the biggest cash robbery in American history were silenced. The brilliant team that worked together to steal a fortune was now being taken apart by its own paranoid leader.